Hello, welcome to the Baltic Football Podcast, where we bring you the latest stories, insights, and analysis from the world of football across the region and beyond. From the thrilling domestic leagues of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia to all the international competitions, we've got you covered. But first, this Thursday on the 30th of January, RFS will play their final game in the Europa League against Dynamo Kyiv. So we're joined by British-Ukrainian sports journalist Andrew Todos, who also has a podcast called Zorya Londonsk. Hello, Andrew. How's it going today?
Hi, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to previewing this glorified friendly, per se, for both of our teams.
Well, I don't quite agree with that. It's kind of bottom of the league. Dynamo Kyiv they obviously don't want to lose and come last, and RFS want to finish in a respectful manner. So hopefully I think it'll be quite competitive, and yeah, the outcome should be quite exciting. But I guess, can you tell us a little bit about the current situation with Dynamo Kyiv and
Mm.
amidst the ongoing war in Ukraine and where they are playing their home matches? Obviously, this fixture isn't in. It will be played in Germany. But what did they? How are they doing at the moment, and how are they performing in the domestic league?
So their domestic current performance is actually kind of a juxtaposition to how they're performing in Europe, whereas their bottom in the Europa League, they're actually top of the Ukrainian Premier League at the winter break. We're currently in the winter break. I'm sure same as in all the Baltic states. And they were doing pretty well in the first half of the season. They beat their closest rivals, Alexandria, twice just before the winter break began, and have also drawn with Shakhtar, who are obviously their closest rivals in terms of ability, quality, and level in the first half of the season. So they're doing pretty well, obviously compared to the European side of things, because that's been a lot more unpredictable, not really understandable, that kind of thing. However, with regards to obviously the current war and everything that's been going on in Ukraine with Russia's invasion, for the past, well, 3 years now, football has been carrying on. The Ukrainian Premier League is now in its third season, so of the intra full scale invasion war period. Dynamo Kyiv play their home games in Kiev. Um, Initially, it was behind closed doors, but since from the start of 2024, when the winter break resumed last year, fans have been allowed into grounds as well.
So
So,
yeah, sorry, please continue.
so yeah, so fans have been allowed, and you can go to them. Of course, the numbers are limited, and there are delays to certain games when there are air raids. So the match is paused, people have to get to the nearest air raid shelter, and you have to deal with those logistics. There are clubs that are in far more dangerous areas of Ukraine that are also still playing their matches at home, unbelievably. But this is just the current realities. And as a result of that, usually Dynamo would have to spend almost a day's travel just to get to Hamburg, where this game would be.
Yeah.
However,
Right, so they can't because they can't fly or anything like that.
yes, however, because of the current timing and the first ever January fixed competitive fixtures for, I guess, both of our respective teams, it means that they've actually had kind of an easier preparation for both this game and the one last week against Galatasaray, in the sense that they've been having their winter training camp in Turkey. They don't have to spend a day's travel. They only have to get on a flight and, be it to Galatasaray. Well, it's pretty close in Istanbul from Antalya, and even to Hamburg, it's a lot shorter
Okay.
than a day's travel.
So do you think they're not being able to play the Europa League games at home has been a big disadvantage for them in terms of that's why they are in that table? And where have they also, why have they performed so much better in the league? Have they had a better defense, or have the opposition been a lot weaker? Where do you think the problems have occurred?
So I think it's actually quite difficult to analyze that just on the pure basis that Dynamo in particular. Shakhtar as well, but Dynamo in particular, because their performances have been substantially poorer than Shakhtar's in Europe over the past 3 years, have used the, you could say, excuse or the reasoning that they have been so poor due to the travel in particular, that they have to travel a day and they've got much worse preparations compared to the opponents of whoever they're playing. And, most people said, okay, that's probably a load of rubbish. It's sort of excuses and all that kind of thing. But now we see in January that they actually put on quite a good performance against Galatasaray in the second half in particular. That maybe it's got legs. However, I think it's still way too early to tell. And the fact that it's only the first year, we'll have to wait and see to really analyse that over the next couple seasons.
But I mean,
Um,
how have the teams performed? How did the team perform in the league compared to the Europa?
well, the thing about the league is that sadly, the level has dropped quite substantially the past 3 years
So
compared
it's
to
not
what it
the
was
league isn't as
pre-invasion.
competitive as it has.
Yes, exactly. So even against, semi-competitive sides, Dynamo have got enough quality in their team to get past those clubs.
Okay.
Not massive batterings or anything like that, but 1-0, 2-0, they'll get the job done. And as a result of that, they can continue. And on top of that, I guess I could also add the fact that during some of the games in the Europa League in the autumn period, Shavkovsky actually experimented in a few of those matches where he's playing like
And
second string sides
we'll be talking about the
and
match
that kind of thing.
a little bit
But
later
yeah,
as well. Okay, so this has been a bit of testing. So talk us through the Galatasaray game because they've not, as you said, they've had a really challenging time in the Europa League. They managed to get a hard-fought 3-3 draw against Galatasaray. What did they do well in that game, and what can they learn from that performance?
well, the guy that came up trumps was veteran Andrew Yarmolenko, who came off the bench second half and put in a bit of a masterclass, sort of
Two
took everyone
goals.
by the scruff. Yeah, 2 goals, scruff of the neck, kind of dragging everyone else with him to try and influence the result. However, I also think that there's a slight assistance coming from the fact that Galatasaray kind of stepped off. They went 3-1 up early on in the second half. They got let off with a red card that got rescinded by VAR, and then they sort of put the foot off the gas, and that let Dynamo come back into the game. So it's kind of difficult to fully analyze whether it was either not really fluke, but just the fact that they had a bit more energy because they've been playing obviously less competitive matches, whilst Galatasaray have been going on throughout the winter period. And whether they just really, they had lack of pressure. Now the fact that they are out 100%, they can just play freely and, give that emotion and play for that pride that they mentioned in the pre-match press conference that they did before the game.
So it's all about pride and the ability to just
Essentially,
get on, try and get the job done a little bit more with less pressure. Okay, so talk us through the tactics. How do they typical play? What formations do they tip? Do they is this starting 11 in, and who are the standout players?
yeah. So usually Dynamo start well. They set up 4-3-3-3. Two wingers, a holding midfielder, for midfielders that try and help out in attack as best as they can, and just the average standard back four. However, previously in the Europa League, we have seen the Shavkovsky utilise three at the back as well, which he did against Roma, and then I think he also did that against Victoria Pilsen, if I'm not mistaken. They lost both those games, but they looked relatively solid because they had an extra man in defence, and it seemed a lot more sensible than the loss, say, to Ferencvaros when they lost 4-0, had a man sent off just before half time, and it sort of all went to pot.
What formation were they playing when they lost 4-0?
I think it was the standard 4-3-3. However, it also has impacted the personnel. As I mentioned previously, Shavkovsky has been experimenting a bit. Slash, you could even say resting players. There's been on occasion that he's actually had key fixtures in the league that he wants to prioritise over, oh, we're going to lose this, or we're bottom of the Europa League anyway. We may as well prioritise the league. kind of a paradoxical situation because I'm playing for the title, but then you're ultimately playing for qualification for next season. So it sort of doesn't make much sense totally, but regardless, I sort of want to utilize. I think they want to try and give a few minutes to different players. Like we had Mykola Shaparenko, who's a very promising talent. He used to be someone that a lot of people rated and expected big things, but now he's sort of coming up 26, 27, and he's still not moved yet. And that's sort of a problem. He's sort of kind of plateaued, dropped off. And as a result of that, actually, he came off at half time against in the last game, and he's suspended for this match after picking up a yellow. And as a result of that, Alexander Pirkalionok came on, who was signed in the summer, and he's a very promising sort of attack-minded midfielder who I think will be trying to create a lot of things going on in this particular game, as well as Vitaly Bialski, who's semi-veteran, the early 30s. He was instrumental in creating, I think, the third goal for Dynamo Kyiv equaliser against Galatasaray. And he's just someone that you can rely on to create chances and even come up with goals as well. Whether Andrew Yarmolenko, the hero of the last game, is going to be starting is another question.
Yeah.
Because as good as he is, he sadly doesn't have the legs to play a full 90. And I would say even full 60. I think really, we probably, well, I would, if I was, a Dynamo Kyiv fan, that he comes on in the second half and maybe tries to play against more tired legs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of the balance of youth and experience, where does the team have lots of energy? How is it a young defense, or do they have some dodgy wing backs? How does the team technically work together?
So there's a lot of inexperience in this team. One of the, I guess, promising talents that of the next sort of few years, and everyone hopes to become a top star, is Taras Mahabko, who's a centre back for Dynamo Kyiv. He's only 19, kind of had a baptism of fire this whole Europa League season.
He's only 17 and he's playing at the back.
19.
19.
Sorry,
yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of his first proper season, full season as a senior. And he's had some tough challenges. And it doesn't help also playing alongside not really to the quality of Dynamo Kyiv, despite what Shavkovsky may say and others may say. Christian Bilivar, who's been deputizing there a lot of the time because the first choice, Denis Popov, is currently injured. So he won't be featuring either. Goal, we're going to have Ruslan Neshcheret, who's also very young, Ukraine under-21 goalkeeper, who's recently become the first choice because Georgi Bushjan, the stalwart that's been the number one for the last number of years, is moving to Saudi Arabia.
Right, so an inexperienced defence, second choice goalkeeper who's also very young. How does the midfield look?
Well, similar, as I mentioned, it's a bit more experience. So you've got Pikolonok, I hope will start there, who was very good when he came on against Galatasaray. He also had a very good start to the European campaign before being injured. Bialski is going to be involved there, I'm sure, as well, who's going to be creating chances. And then just in front of him, as a centre forward, probably the main goal scoring threat in Dynamo's side is Vladislav Vanat, who's relatively still young, I think 22, 23. Okay. He's been the top scorer in the Ukrainian Premier League last season and is currently the top scorer in the Ukrainian Premier League this season so far. So he's going to be the one that I think RFS will have to stop.
What are his abilities? Is he very fast? Is he very technically talented? Is he a target man?
Definitely not a target man. He loves the balls going into his feet. Got a lot of pace as well. So he'll be someone that, likes to run onto things rather than waiting for something in the box to fall to him.
So he's a bit like the Latvian legend that once played for Dynamo Kyiv, Perparkovskis, who scored actually for Kyiv against Real Madrid in a 2-2 draw. But that's the current RFS club director, so there's a bit of a history there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess like talking of like the Dynamo Kyiv's youth development and so on, they have produced some brilliant talents such as Shevchenko, Rebrov. I remember back in the day for Tottenham as well. Could you highlight if like a few of these players might end up going to Europe, and if so, well, bigger teams in Europe. If so, which teams do you think they could be?
Well, I'm not sure if he's going to be back yet. He has just returned to training this week. Volodymyr Brashko, he's the Dynamo Kyiv defensive midfielder. Um, he's still relatively young, I think only 22, and he's sort of made a real rise over the past couple of seasons. Made his debut last season for Ukraine, played at the Euros as well, and now he's sort of seen as the first choice defensive midfielder for the national team and for Dynamo Kiev as well. So if he comes back, that would be good to look at. But he's probably someone that a lot of people have already been linking with moves to the Premier League, somewhere like a Bournemouth, who are maybe not afraid to splash a bit of money on a youngster.
So
As
is he a bit of a tenacious ball-winning defensive midfielder?
a bit, but I think it's more that he's got this box to box energy. He also can pop up and score goals from the edge of the area, likes linking up attacks as well. So he's got that versatility about him at both ends of the pitch.
Okay. So I guess moving on to we've discussed tactics. Tell us a little bit about the head coach, Alexandra Shovosky. What kind of manager is he? Is he more about tactics or about does he more is he more focused on motivating the individual players?
A mix, to be honest. He's a relative novice when it comes to first team. The only sort of club that he has managed as a head coach has been Dynamo Kiev. He came in last season when Mircea Lucescu decided to leave the position. Ended up helping Dynamo Kiev, to a silver medal after they were really way off it early on in the season. And now, right now, he's leading them to obviously gold to win the championship. So we'll see how that ends up going in the second half of the season. But as a manager, to say there are some sort of like tactics or something like that that are extraordinary at the moment, realistically, there isn't some kind of like game plan that you're like, wow, this is sort of pioneering or anything like that. They try and, have some build up play when they're trying to counter in particular, which has been a lot of the story in this European campaign. It's quite difficult to adapt to the intensity of European football when you're playing in the Ukrainian Premier League, where you're actually playing against 10 men behind the ball a lot of the time during the season. So that's something that's quite difficult, not just for them, but other Ukrainian clubs to adapt to. So we'll see how that ends up. RFS, who paper the more, I don't know, you would say less grand teams. That Dynamo, when this draw was made, were expected to beat, but now we haven't got. We're not. There's no guarantees of that.
Yeah.
Exactly, especially with the Ajax result and everything else. So, and he's also quite a mellow character. So I don't know how good he is at, but he is. He's
Okay.
a legend. He's a
Yeah.
legend. So I think that respect resonates and sort of helps out for the players.
Okay, so it's a very young squad. What do you feel are the biggest weaknesses within that current team and the starting 11 and the tactics?
Defense. I think we'll definitely. There are problems there. It's a bit too easy to get through them. Christian Bilivar is not the highest quality of defenders that Terasma have got alongside him.
What
Very
in terms of
inexperienced.
first touch or passing, or is he error prone?
Decision making, there are problems there that you just probably shouldn't be playing for this team. But he is the son-in-law of the club president.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that explains maybe a fair bit. As for the fullbacks as well, they're not the most consistent either. Depending on who ends up playing, either of them, either of sort of the backup and the first team options, they've got mistakes in them as well. They like to give away penalties from time to time, rash decisions, and all that kind of thing. That's something certainly an area that is most problematic.
Okay, interesting. So they've got a dangerous attack, particularly with the striker who's top scorer of the Ukrainian league, but their defense is
Mm.
leaking goals,
Hmm.
few holes. Okay, so I guess what are your predictions for this game? What do you think the outcome will be?
I genuinely have no idea. This is probably the hardest game to predict in the whole sort of Europa League campaign. And ironically, I sort of completely wrote them off last week because I thought Galatasaray, good luck. And they ended up putting in a good performance. So I think the best way from a sort of Dynamo Kyiv Ukrainian football perspective is to have no expectations. And as a result of that, you get some kind of positive to come out of it. But I think RFS are going to be no easy task. They'll come at it. Um, you know what? If it ends up being a draw somehow, I wouldn't be surprised. In all honesty, the Hamburg crowd over the season, it's not been particularly big, and that's for the sort of bigger teams that have come to town. And it's around 5,000 in like a
Okay.
50,000 stadium. So
Yeah.
it could even be lower than that.
Okay.
But so I don't think that's going to have any impact on anything.
So an empty
Um,
stadium, expect an empty
yeah,
stadium with no out.
they could have just played this in Turkey, as
Yeah.
their friendly. But here we are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they've
my
played two friendly. They've got quite a few friendlies with Dynamo Kyiv lined up, I believe, and they've had a few in the past as well. So
yeah. So there you go. I'm just going to be too positive, not too negative. I think a draw will probably somehow end up uh, happening.
okay, we'll see. We could take. I'm sure RFS could take a draw, but ideally, playing for all the points and everything, a win would be
Yeah,
good. But yeah, let's see. But I mean, Shakhtar they had a they won the previous round in the Champions League.
yeah.
Yeah, so did what was the when those two met, when Dynamo Kyiv and Shakhtar met, what was the last score?
It was 1-1, and that
Okay.
was actually, funnily enough, coming straight after European fixture where Shrubkovsky basically played a second string side against Roma, who
Right.
out to save the team for the Premier League match. So
Okay.
at the moment there's nothing like that because the Ukrainian Premier League doesn't resume until the end of February. So it's all guns blazing. Really,
Yeah.
people have got
Yeah.
a shot at showing themselves.
It will be interesting to pre-season teams playing against each other. Hopefully, there will be a good, decent tempo and a fast game of football, I guess. But well, Andrew, thanks so much for your time and sharing your insights. I do recommend people tune into Andrew's podcast as well. It's a worthwhile listen to, and Andrew's also got a lot of experience as a sports journalist as well. So have a look what Andrew's doing. We'll be sharing links at the end of this podcast and with links below. But if you enjoyed today's discussion, make sure you follow us for more episodes featuring stories from the Baltic region and beyond. Please feel free to share, comment, uh, and like as many things as you can. We're also continue to look for sponsors, but so please join our growing community. If you're interested in partnering us, please get in touch. But for now, enjoy football and enjoy the final of the Europa League as RFS take on Dynamo Kyiv.